Like, what happened in that scenario?
You can convince me.
I know, I was like, no.
You're allowed to smack him for that.
I know. I'm like, usually
Watch
I
it
take
and judge for yourself.
I'm like, that gets dangerous, John, because normally I take everything you say for word for fact.
Well, see,
so.
that's the problem because
So you both can see the screen and you can both hear us, okay?
correct.
Okay.
The,
awesome.
the ladies are still a little faint. I can hear John very clearly.
Well, move this a little closer. It declines with the square of distance.
Is this better?
That's a little better, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Awesome. Okay.
I'm just
so-
louder because I have had amps that went to 11. So yeah.
Your voice overall is louder. All right.
So I can hear myself.
So we're recording.
We are recording, are we not?
Well,
Yep, I heard it.
Normally it will show.
Yes, it is, but it's showing up on this screen.
Oh, okay.
That's been going back and forth.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for joining us on this session on open classrooms. And so, I guess I want to first maybe share a little bit of the motivation for bringing this project. It's now, this is the third year we've done
I
it.
believe so.
Third year we've done open classrooms in some kind of capacity. It started out in a different format and we've kind of,
We started in
Okay,
spring
yeah.
2019, which was spring
Spring
2020, which was
2020.
just such a wonderful time to
Yeah.
experiment with new things.
Yeah, and so so it's gone through kind of a bit of a transformation over time, but for me, when I first came out of graduate school, like many other people coming out of graduate school, I didn't know what good teaching looked like. Not to say that I didn't have some good educational experiences in my time in undergrad and graduate school, but going into a research focused institution, which most people who are pursuing PhDs are, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about one of the main responsibilities as faculty we all have, which is teaching. And so, when I first came to Oswego, I met John and Rebecca at one of the orientations.
The new faculty
and
orientation.
grabbed a reading book and showed up to the reading group, and I was like, oh, like there are effective ways to be educators, and it was something that I was really interested in, and it was awesome to read the book and to hear people's experiences. But for me, I really wanted to see it. Like I wanted to see what it looked like in action, because when you're going through some of those techniques, it takes a while to like really wrap around your head, like, okay, but how do I do all of them? Or how do I, make it fit into my class, and, what has worked for people and what hasn't worked, for people. And so eventually through, various conversations, serving, as a faculty member on CULT, many other people felt the same way. And so John was like, well, there's these really cool programs out there where faculty can observe each other and really, get to spend time.
I was
talking about
suggesting this for about 2 years. And when I
Yeah.
brought it up before the advisory committee, there were always objections like, well, we can't do this because of this and because of this. And I kept getting discouraged. And finally, we just said, let's just do this.
Yeah.
And then we'll start it. And basically one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because teaching is one of the most siloed occupations. We're in our classrooms alone.
Mhm.
We only know what we're doing and what we happen to hear about from our colleagues or what we may see at a conference or something, but we really don't get to directly observe what other people are doing. And that's somewhat unusual in many occupations. That normally you get to learn from each other just as part of your day-to-day work experience, but we don't always see that.
Yeah.
That we're most of our experience with other people teaching was when we were students. And back when some of us were students, most of them had no clue as to how we learned or anything else. And we've learned a lot about how people learn, and people are, doing a lot of very different things. And by getting a chance to see what other people are doing, you can learn from their experiences. You can see what's working well, how they might do things a little bit differently. And then you can talk about it to see why they're doing things certain ways and why you haven't tried that, or what you might suggest to them and what they might suggest to you. And, to the extent to which we can do this and share experiences, I think we're all going to learn from the experience.
Yeah, and importantly, particularly for faculty who are starting out on the tenure track, the only real engagement we get with our peers in the classroom is through tenure and promotion evaluations, and that's a fairly high stakes, a little more nerve-wracking of an experience because you're being observed in this official capacity, and it has consequences for decisions on your job. And so it's a very different environment, and it's not to say it's not, it certainly is important in many ways, but to be able to engage in a non-evaluative observation, something where faculty can just get together in a very supportive environment and reflect on what's going on in the classroom, and to be able to take away that in a like I said, a very supportive environment is something that I'm really glad that we kind of took a chance on and started incorporating here on campus. So that's essentially what open classrooms are, right? Faculty are invited to host other faculty members or staff members in their class. They get to invite them into those spaces, whether it's online or in person, and start some conversations about what's going on in the classroom, and reflect on the observers' experiences, the hosts' experiences, and walk away with hopefully some ideas of how you can bring back new ideas to your classroom, or how you might share things that are happening in your classroom with the faculty member that you're observing. And so in fall 2022, so that's the
Last semester.
Last semester, most recent iteration of this program, we had 12 classes offered. So 1 in the School of Ed, 10 in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and over the years we've had others in the School of Business, and kind of a different breakdown, but we've typically had somewhere between 12 or 10 and 15 courses being offered that faculty had offered up to other people to observe. They differ in modalities. So we've sort of seen a shift, again, because we had originally conceived this program in a semester where we all ended up being remote. And then we're remote for a period of time after that. We've seen a bit of a shift that we're now seeing more face-to-face classes as opposed to synchronous online or
Instead of April
asynchronous
2020, when it was
online.
pretty much all either asynchronous or remote synchronous.
Yeah, so we've seen that shift. We're getting a lot more in-person observations happening, which is pretty cool. In this past semester, we had about 10 observers. Some people observed multiple classes. Some people had several people observing their classes, others just a couple. And ultimately, the way this program works is that we put out a call for hosts, for faculty who are willing to invite others into their classroom. Once we get a list of those courses that are available, we ask for observers to sign up. And they, at this point, the way we've set up this program is that we just have a sign up list where we have a number of spots available for each course, and faculty just go into the document on their own to sign up to observe those classes. And then we encourage the hosts and observers to engage in pre and post discussions about the observation. So, really the benefit of doing the pre-observation meeting is really great, because faculty can introduce themselves, get to know each other a little bit, talk about what they want to gain out of the observation, some challenges that they've been having in the class, or some successes that they've had in the class that they're interested in sharing with their colleagues. And then, of course, the post discussions are also important to, talk about what did go well in the class, or what was I impressed by, or what do I want to take away from my class, or how did we find some connections and similarities across campus.
And sometimes, how did you do that? Or,
Yeah.
why are you doing this? And
Yeah.
Were the So the 10 observers, is that included with the 12, like the individuals who? offered
Some of
their
them were
12
the same, but not
Okay.
always. Sometimes people
it
would
doesn't
let
have
other
to be.
people, for example, I signed up to let people view my class,
Yeah.
but I didn't
Didn't
observe,
okay.
partly because of my role and partly because it was just a really, really busy semester. And we were actually pleased that we got as many people as we did, given that we were engaged in a transition to Brightspace, and everyone was a little bit both stretched and stressed about that transition.
So you could sign up and just offer your course or just.
Or just to
observer.
observe.
You didn't
That
have
okay.
the two did not have to be the same. They
Okay.
often were,
Okay.
but
this year.
anyone could observe and anyone could share, and they could be the same or different people.
And I should note that one thing we do, make sure of is that the people who are observing the hosts of the classes are not serving on personnel committees that are, directly overseeing those people's tenure and promotion portfolios. We have not run into that issue yet.
And that was a main concern of the committee, that this could be used as a way of doing summative evaluations and doing something that might harm someone. The goal here is just to provide, to share.
Yeah, provide kind of a low stakes, informal discussion about.
No stakes,
No stakes,
other than the
yeah,
potential
yeah.
for learning something new.
Exactly. So today we actually, have quite a few people, who have participated at some point in time. I don't know, Jessica.
I have not actually. I had no, but I've heard good things.
Maybe
So.
some point.
Well, I think this spring I probably will.
Going back just a little bit to
Yeah.
the sharing, one of the things we had hoped that would happen, and I don't think it happened in all cases, is that in the pre-meeting, people would talk about what they're doing, if it's a face-to-face class, what they're doing in the class, why they're doing it, and what people might expect to see, and how it fits into the broader context of the class. And if the instructor is using Brightspace as a major part of the course, that perhaps the observer could be added as an observer within that, so they can see it within the broader context. That didn't always happen either, but that's optimal. And then after the observation, the goal would be to come back and chat together. Sometimes only one of those happen, sometimes both of them happen, but ideally you'd have both.
So today we have, various people who participated in this program this past semester. And so I want to introduce Chris Stein and Paul Austin, myself, John. We've been participants in this, and of course, Jessica, whatever questions you have.
Yes,
please
I
chime
will.
in with
Yes,
it.
yeah.
But if we can start with, what department you're in, what role you served in this semester, if it was a host or observer or both. What class did you have people observe, or did you observe? What was that modality, and ultimately what drove you to participate? So if Chris, you want to go ahead and start, just because I have your name there first.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Sure. My name's Chris Stein. I am a associate professor for the technology department, and I teach 2 sections of industrial design, and I teach 1 section of technology and civilization. And to go back to your earlier point, I came to this institution. This is my first official full-time semester, although I have been an adjunct since before COVID. And it was interesting with our staff orientation this year. At one point, I remember everybody was going around the room, and I thought to myself, this is the smartest group of people I have ever sat in. I mean, doctorates in astronomy and virology, and it was incredible. But it was funny, as the provost ran around and we kind of introduced ourselves, it became very evident to me that the thing that most of the new hires were nervous about was teaching. And I had the exact opposite feeling. I spent 19 years in the classroom teaching middle school, and I think I've done 18,000 individual student lessons because I taught 5 classes a day. And for me, I wanted to observe Paul Austin's class and in kind of a self-serving way. I used to do a lot of the teacher training in my public school that I worked in. And one of the best experiences we ever had was kind of this open classroom activity. And I was one of the trainers, and it was interesting getting the emails where it was saying that, you were doing that here at this institution. And I thought, this is a great opportunity for me to learn the culture of the institution, and also see some teaching. And then I just happened to see Paul's class was happening, and we both really teach design. Mine is more physical and artifact based, furniture, solving physical problems, and his is more of a computer based, right? Digital problem solving. And so when I saw that, I thought, this is perfect for me because I wanted to see how someone else taught. The other thing that I didn't know that was beneficial was that, Paul was completely virtual with all of his classes and students here at Oswego, and, being downstate and working for IBM. And I just sat in on the class, and it was fantastic. It was nice to see that a lot of the ideas and design process were the same. They directly applied, but I got a lot of really great ideas from Paul in his class and how he kind of checked in with his students.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned that there was a open classrooms kind of project that you had been in previously?
Yeah, I worked for Liverpool Central School District, a large school district south here. And I worked there for 19 years, and I was one of the teacher leaders before I got my CAS. And I did a lot of principal work as well, observing teachers. And one of the things that we always said in our district was, if you were struggling or if you were on a teacher improvement plan, you need to go around, and we would offer staff, days where they could go and visit other classrooms. And a lot of people came back from that experience and were like, oh, okay. And you could see like the light had kind of gone off in their head. And until you really see that and see how, an effective teacher manages their classroom, it's really hard to understand, how much really goes into it. And I've done a lot of different things in my life. I've owned quite a few businesses and done a lot of things, but I would say teaching is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And when I was young, I kind of thought that most problems in life you could kind of steamroll through like sheer work. And teaching was really the first thing for me that you could not steamroll with sheer work, with sheer output. And the human condition is this ever evolving, changing, sometimes magical, sometimes challenging thing. And there's no reset button. There's no silver bullet. And, it's a craft. It really, really is. And it was just a fascinating experience for me.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Because I do think often about how much training goes into, elementary, secondary, primary school teachers. And, thinking about like, oh, well, yeah, of course you have student teacher, what do they call them? Interns?
Student teachers, yes.
Okay. So
Mhm.
they, and they spend months, right, in the same classroom, kind of observing and everything. And we never do this, as
Right.
college faculty. And so I think that's awesome that you were able to take kind of that experience from, different levels of education and
Yep.
that was a motivating point to join this program. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
Paul, what about you?
Oh, you're muted.
Hi.
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 I find it hard to believe that with that phase, Chris has 19 years in addition to his Oswego experience, because I
Middle school
know,
kids keep you young.
yeah, okay. You're looking good for your age. Let's see. I work for IBM. This is not my full-time job. I was asked to do this after working with a teacher for several years to sort of assist his class, and that was Bastian Tenbergen. As Chris mentioned, the class was essentially about software design, and I think it's actually called that. I should know this. I taught it.
I think it is.
But
yeah.
instead of a typical software class where you come in every week and you're given a new assignment, code a red black tree, add up the numbers of the grades and average them, something like that, exercises that you're done every week and you hand in and the teacher reviews them and hands them back to you. This is much different in that the class involves telling the class at the beginning, you're going to produce a software product by the end of this semester that will work, and I'm going to grade you on how well you work together. This is kind of what I do on a daily basis because I'm a manager of 13 software developers, or as I like to say, I'm a staff psychologist to them, but I figured it would be roughly the same, and it kind of was in some ways, although dealing with people who are young and inexperienced in this, I had to evolve and be a teacher to do that thing. So I had no experience with this except what I have done throughout IBM, and I have taught classes before at IBM, sort of. I've taught people on one-to-one, I've taught people in groups, that kind of thing, and I've always been aware of the fact that getting feedback on what you do is always a good thing, whether that's editing of a paper, peer review of the work that you do in a scientific experiment, or someone just to say, Paul, lay off on the farm jokes, nobody gets them, or something like that. So I appreciated that, and I happened to get lucky in that Chris signed up to watch my class because of the similarities in what we do. And we talked a little bit beforehand and he seemed really excited. I told him I had not really prepped my class for this, except to tell them to be a little bit more verbose during the process so that any little nuance of something they were talking about was explained so he could understand it to some degree. And I think they did well with that. And then afterwards we talked and I was very interested to hear what he does in the technology department, how similar some of our methods are in software development versus, making real objects in the real life that we all use, and, that kind of thing. So that was helpful. And it was good to have someone not look at me and say, what the hell did you just do? That was horrible. Don't do that again or something. He seemed like he thought I did a good job. So that was the main reason I got into it. But in short, yes, I work for the computer science department, teaching a class called software design. This is my first time ever doing it. I wanted some feedback. I'm looking forward to observing Chris's class if he's doing it this semester, or somebody else's class, so I can get more about it, because I really do believe in learning from other people I've never taught before in this type of an environment. I've taught IBMers and you have expectations about teaching IBMers, that kind of thing, but this was a little bit different. I think the semester went well. I appreciated the feedback that I got from Chris about it, and this semester I would really like to commit to doing it again, although I'm teaching freshman composition, not computer science. But I hope Chris is open to me watching his course or me catching somebody else's. I just didn't have the time last semester.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, you pointed out something that I know previous participants have really enjoyed in this program is the connections that they've gotten to make across programs and across campus, because we don't typically, as John kind of mentioned, teaching is a very, individual thing, and we're not always encouraged to kind of make those connections. But even in, classes that are dealing with substantially different content, there's almost always something to take away from that. I think about, and I had signed up for John's class, and I didn't really dive into the class that much, again, because I overcommitted myself. But we did kind of talk and go through, one day just briefly, like his online class. And even though he teaches economics, which is not my field, I teach in the criminal justice department. Getting to see the way he structures an online class was invaluable, and I got emails every week telling me that I didn't sign into the class, which again, getting to
Or
see
participate in the discussions.
Participate in the discussions, and because essentially John added me as an observer in the class, and so the same kinds of reminders that the students are getting in that class, I was also getting in that class, because I hadn't accessed some of those discussion prompts and things like that. But it was cool to see, just all the tools that, other faculty members across disciplines are using. And those are certainly things, that I've used a little bit of in my classes, but not nearly as extensively. But, to get those ideas and bring them back to our class, I think is definitely a big takeaway in that. So I actually offered up my senior seminar class. So I teach in the Department of Criminal Justice. And so that class is a small class, 15 students, face-to-face class. And I had, I think 4 people participate as observers, and they weren't able to make it to this session here. But what was really great is, again, I had people from all over campus, like not even I even had someone who wasn't actually in an official teaching capacity to observe my class, because they knew that down the line they were going to be teaching at some point, and they were going to be diving into some of the similar conversations and topics that my class covered. And so they wanted to see, how do you structure that environment to make those kind of difficult conversations on racism and differences and disparities in the criminal justice system. How do you create conversations around those topics that, a lot of people might tend to shy away from in the classroom. And so it was, cool, because not only, did it kind of reach out to other faculty across campus, but, even people who are not in a teaching capacity, felt like that was something they still wanted to observe and kind of take away. And so it was a really nice experience this semester with my observers. We met before and after, though I actually wasn't able to meet with a couple of people after, just the way the schedules worked, and we just weren't able to find a time, but most of that's on me for dropping the ball on kind of coordinating that time. But one of the things that I really took away from that experience is adding we've talked about this in other sessions, but I'm one of those people that's constantly calling out, like at the very end of class, okay, here's what we're gonna do next, like as
they're out the
people
door.
are gonna, out
Right.
the door and everything. It's something that I've always struggled with. It's something that I've always known that I need to work on, is really ending class in a very complete way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the word I wanted to go for, but kind of having a conclusion to class that was strong and wasn't these kind of call. Anyways, my point is, every time I do participate in this program, I'm reminded of like, oh yeah, there are things that I can do to make this work a little more smoothly, right? So even classes that I'm quite proud of, I'm like, oh yeah, I still have room to grow, and there's in engaging in those conversations are really informative and enlightening. So John, do you want to share?
Well, I've done this a couple of times,
Yeah.
and I've had a number of people observe my classes, and I've gotten some really good feedback from them, including from Sandy from your department last year. And I've had people from very different disciplines, and the discussions were always positive. One of the things I've observed here, but also from our reading groups, is that when people get together, where people often think, well, I really need to know how other people in my discipline are doing this. But, when you talk to other people, they're facing the same types of problems, no matter what they're teaching, and the same types of challenges. And seeing how people from different disciplines approach it is often more useful than talking to other people in your discipline, who often tend to talk mostly to each other. It just provides a wider variety of options. And I think that's useful. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed both observing classes and as well as having my class observed, and the feedback and the discussions afterwards.
And so Chris and Paul, you both have kind of talked a bit about some of the big takeaways that you've experienced in this program, but was there anything else that really stood out to you in the project, or anything that you observed that you were like, oh yeah, I'm going to take this back to my classroom, or something that's kind of made you think, okay, when I teach this class again, or I'm back in the classroom next semester, I want to make sure I do this. Was there anything that stood out?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So like Paul said earlier on, his goal in his class is to have one fully working solution by the end of the semester. Now, the way that I teach industrial design is there are minor design activities. So I kind of start really basic because the design process is a long process and a lot of students aren't familiar with it. And we start these small series. They get feedback at each one of the steps, and then at the end of the semester they go out, they find their own problem, they write a design brief, they come up with a solution, they present it to me. Then they have to work through the design process, all the drawings, CAD drawings, 3D files, 3D printing, and modeling. And then they get up and give a big final critique at the end of the semester. And what I liked about Paul's class was they're actively doing the critique. When I observed his class, they were actively doing the critique. It seemed like almost every single day, because the students were then checking in with their different teams, front end, back end, different client side facing software, back end or whatever. And it was interesting, and it made me think a lot about how I deliver my design content and my design activities. And one, how many is appropriate? How do you scaffold them? And then could I devote more time to a larger, more intense project? And I struggle with that as a teacher. I think when you've done this long enough, you can always come up with pros and cons for everything, and that means you're still engaged and you still care. And, if I give students too much time on some of these design projects, then I feel like the momentum falls. But what I liked about Paul's approach was that kind of daily check-in and like, okay, where are you? What problems are you having? And then the communication out between the teams, I thought was really nice to see. So, gave me some great ways to take my class, which I enjoyed.
You're muted.
Just to explain what we did in my class is we used something called agile methodology. I don't know if you've heard about that, but in software development, when I first started back about 30 years ago, IBM would say, okay, we're going to make a new release of this operating system. We'll talk to you in 2 years when we deliver it. And we put together what we thought the client wanted. We did it according to specifications, one step after the other: design, coding, testing, technical writing, delivery. And by the time it got to the clients, they're like, yeah, that's great, but Microsoft just put this out and we didn't want all this stuff. Why didn't you talk to us in the meantime? So we'd make little enhancements that came out every 6 months, every 3 months or whatever. And around the year 2000, somebody came up with this idea called agile development that isn't entirely new, and it's actually interesting in a lot of ways that I'll get to. But what they do is they say, we're not going to deliver you a whole system, a whole solution or anything in the next week, but we're going to show you what we're working on. So you need a new application that helps you hail a taxi. Okay, well, here's what the front end of it looks like. This is how you log in. This is how you're going to do it. This is not the whole application, but we wrote this in the last 2 weeks. What do you think of it? Well, I really don't like the fact that I have to give in my credentials from somebody else, that I have to enter a credit card number. I don't like having to do this. I want to use my PayPal, whatever it is. Oh, okay, well, that's great. We'll incorporate those things in the next release. And then when the next release comes around, those things are added. We add other things, and we move very incrementally, but we keep on looping back to the customer and saying, here's what we've done. What do you think? Here's what we've done. What do you think? So that's a looping system right there. And then the other looping system is every day, or every 3 days, every other day in the case of the class, my students would get up and they would do what's called a scrum. And in a scrum, everybody gets up and they talk about 3 things. What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? What problems do I have? So the designers would get up and say, well, yesterday we designed the front end. Today we're going to design more of the front end. The problem that we're having is we haven't heard back from the software developers about whether or not they can do what this is. And then the software developers are in the room and they say, oh, well, we'll talk to you after class. You table that discussion for later, but the problem has been brought up. 2 people know to talk to each other. They go on and they do that. Every day the class was like this, occasionally with a lecture about something that I did at IBM or about specifics with Agile. And what's interesting about it is it's like a lot of things in life. You try something, you learn a little bit, you go back, you try again. It's almost like the scientific method. And that's how things evolve and get a little bit better every time you work on it. And that's what all we really hope for is every day to try and do a little bit more and do a little bit better.
I like
And to
that.
find out that it's done in manufacturing too, that was pretty fascinating. To find that it applies in that world,
Yeah.
although somewhat differently, is what I want to see next time. That's what I would like to look into.
And that's how also effective learning takes place. You
Right.
try something,
Yeah.
you make some mistakes and you learn from it and make it better
Right.
after getting feedback.
Mhm. Yeah, I was gonna say that, I think a lot of faculty, across various, disciplines have often, struggled with like, okay, I give all this really detailed feedback to my students, but they never actually incorporate it into their writing or into, their work, whatever it is that they're, trying to communicate. And, but this sounds like a really good way of creating that culture of feedback in your classroom, because like you said, this is, how the industry has been doing this. And so I know that was, kind of motivation for changing up some of the structure of my course this past semester was like, I want to create this culture of feedback because that's how, careers work, and
Right.
that's, part of why we've engaged in this program is that, we don't want to just stay complacent and, I mean, we could, but it would make our jobs pretty boring after a while if we never thought to, kind of get that feedback and start, making different changes to make things more effective. And
Yeah, if I can interrupt just a second,
Yeah.
one more thing I got out of this was an idea that I've been pushing for a while at some of the other teachers at the school, because I've been working with the English department as well. There was a class called cultural writing literacy or something taught by Donna Steiner, where she takes the writers and she says, go do something productive with your writing skills for the community. So they redesigned a website. And I thought, well, you're redesigning a website. Wouldn't it be cool if you did that with a bunch of programmers? I'm sure some of the writers can do that, but why don't we have more cross-pollination between these departments? And when I worked with the business teachers like Kristen Sotak or Sarah Bonzo, they're asking for data analytics. And I said, well, the people who are chiefly good at doing data analytics are typically computer scientists, but they don't know business. So why don't those two mesh together? And when I'm teaching this course about putting software together, yeah, some of the engineers, the future engineers in that class know how to write, some of them don't. But wouldn't they benefit from somebody who could do that for them and put together this disciplinary class where you have, writers, programmers, and business people that put something really smashing together? And wouldn't that look good on your resume when you go to apply for a job?
Yeah, I'm even thinking, you saying that, thinking about the health and technology course that we have, throwing them in that group too is a great way, all of those different departments.
Right. I mean, how many nurses are out there cursing the software that they use on a daily
Right.
basis because no
Yes.
software engineer thought I should go talk to a real freaking nurse?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's, and I think we can kind of get so caught up in like just our own discipline and our own, curriculum that we don't always get challenged to think about how we really do connect with other disciplines and how that could benefit people, in their careers or, the community abroad.
Yeah, I think I told Chris when we talked last semester that one of my teachers that I was a creative writing major of all things, and I wrote a book of poems towards the end of my schooling there, but I wanted to print it. So somebody said, you should work with Dave Fox and take his technology class on printing. I'm like, okay, cool. So I did that, and I learned a lot from him because he's well versed in a lot of things, business and other things. And he said, you may not like it, but a church is a business, and what do they got to do? They got to print a missile every week that says, this is what's going on. There's a car wash coming, a bake sale, and all that kind of thing. They got to do this kind of thing. So they need graphics. Yes, a priest needs a business manager. And I was like, wow. So yeah, writers need someone who helped them put books together. And that cross-disciplinary attitude was something I really admired that Dave Fox taught me.
And Dave Fox, just for a bit of history for people who don't know him, was originally in our Department of Technology, but then he developed the graphic, or well, the graphic design program, graphic design major at Oswego, and then it got shifted into the art department, and that's been taken up. Actually, Rebecca now is part of the
Really?
same follow-up. It became a much bigger program, and it's a fairly large share of our majors now. So Dave Fox started that, though, in the Department of Technology.
Wow.
Yep.
Excellent. So we have a few, we've got a few minutes left. And so, if it's, unless there's obviously anything you want to share about your experience, but, both of you have kind of talked about potentially participating again this next semester.
What could we do better?
Yeah, what could we do better?
On our side.
Is there anything else that, you would like to see as part of this program?
Having only seen one iteration, I don't know what to say, although I really appreciated, one, the opportunity, two, the organization. All I had to do was say I was interested in it and whatever, fill out some information. And then suddenly I got a note that said, yeah, someone's interested in watching your class. I'm like, uh-oh. And it
Part
went
of it is that
well.
anxiety. Yeah.
I wish more people would participate in it. If there's anything I can do to further that end, I will, whether it's a testimonial, I'll you take my picture and put a pull quote next to me, whatever. I really hope this kind of thing takes off and you do more with it, because it's crucial to what we do in my business, both from client to IBM and IBMer to IBMer. I have to counsel my employees all the time, don't say that to that person, or don't code your stuff this way, or, this is not how this is done, or whatever, or great job, you're doing great, continue doing that, whatever. It's essential and it's a gift.
Chris, what about you?
Again, like what Paul said, I think he's on the right track there. It's hard going through my first cycle. One of the things I think from coming from like public education, where we used to do this often, is at the college level, we tend to teach in little silos, right? Our schedules are different. I'm on the floor with 3 of my colleagues who I rarely ever see here in Park Hall. And I think it was just nice to have kind of a menu almost of all these different classes and things that were happening. And, I primarily teach in person, although during COVID, I was delivering technology and civilization, virtually. But I think having the option of in-person or virtual, and just kind of a menu. And I guess if I had to give you any feedback, I guess I'd always like to see more things on the menu. And I also think culturally, it's so good to get out and see how, Paul does his thing through IBM and downstate and virtually, but I'd also like to see economics. I'd like to see poli-sci, just all these different things, because I think you can be in a silo here. And like, I went to college here. So a lot of the professors in my department were actually my professors when I was here as a student. And that's interesting. But it would be nice to just get out of that silo a little bit. And I think the more diverse the menu, the more choices we have, I think the better that would be.
Yeah. I also wonder if maybe we even expand the observation period, because, we typically try to, keep it to a couple of weeks or so, but maybe if it's expanded, more people can kind of, be able to engage in the program. Let's think about that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll try
Yeah.
again. And we normally offered a deadline for people to sign up, and then we've always expanded it because we never got as many people as we'd like. So we'll probably end up doing the same. So we do have to start early to make sure we give people lots of opportunity to sign up.
You'll have to share with me your materials.
I will.
Yeah.
I was actually working on that the other day. It was like, I gotta, update these for the 2023.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll work on it. We'll do it again, and we appreciate your feedback, and
And your participation. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Yeah,
Now I'm
I'm
going to
looking
stop
forward
the
to
recording.
participating again.
Thank you.
Now, hold for just a second. Actually, I do want to say one more thing to Paul. Where is the recording? Okay. One is, you sent us a note at